Welcome to our panel discussion on the role of tech in the dissemination of misinformation. And this is part of Tech in Ghana 2020, the first virtual edition, but the 7th Tech in Ghana overall. My name is Kokui Selormey Hansen. I'll be moderating this session with a group of erudite, dynamic panelists who I will introduce to you shortly. But before we get into the discussion, I just wanted to share a news item with you regarding fake news, since we're going to be talking a lot about this. Now, recently, the president of Ghana, Nana-Addo-Dankwa Akufo-Addo, has been speaking on this, and he's called for the elimination of fake news from the media space. He said, it's not only alarming, but it poses a serious threat and danger to the very fabric of society. It is great that we no longer have to wait till tomorrow morning to find out what happened yesterday, thanks to technology. But again, thanks to technology, we now have the phenomenon of people manufacturing totally false or fake stories that easily pass off as news. All right, so as we bear in mind the fact that fake news is playing quite a role in current events, especially with election season, not only here in Ghana, but in the US as well, let's have a great discussion on what we can do with tech to kind of mitigate the effects of fake news. So, the role of tech in the dissemination of misinformation. Our panelists joining us for this discussion today are Kojo Boakye, who is the Director of Public Policy for Facebook. Welcome, Kojo. Great to have you on the panel for today.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Kokui. We're excited about it.
Great, fantastic. Juliet Amoah is Executive Director of Penplusbytes. Good morning, Juliet.
Hi, good morning, Kokui. Very excited to be here. Along with complementary work.
All right. Sulemana Braimah is the Executive Director of Media Foundation for West Africa. Good morning, Sule.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Palgrave Boakye-Danquah is Executive Director of the Kandifo Institute. Hi, Palgrave.
Hi, Kokui, and hi, everyone.
All right, welcome to the panel. We'll get you on video shortly. We can hear you, and I'm sure very soon we'll see you. There he is. Hi, Palgrave.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kokui.
All right. Okay, let's have a great discussion. Remember, if you are with us, you can follow us on social media at Tech in Ghana on both Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget to share whatever we're discussing today. Later on, we'll open up for questions. So you can ask our panelists anything you have regarding this discussion. So let's get right into it. I'll start off with you, Kojo. You're with Facebook, obviously. It's a big platform, and I'm sure you're inundated with people complaining about fake news, with having to figure out what to do about fake news on that platform. So how does a platform as big as Facebook manage to tackle this? And as you're answering that, maybe you can just give us a couple of minutes to tell us exactly what you do at Facebook.
Cool. So let me start with what I do, and then I'll try and not take up all the other panelists' time by telling you how Facebook is happening.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, my name is Kojo Boakye. I am the Director of Public Policy for Facebook, which means I'm responsible for all of Facebook's policy work in the region, and supported by a wonderful team that covers not only Anglophone West Africa, but Francophone Africa, Southern Africa, Eastern Horn of Africa, Central Africa as well. So it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention my fantastic colleagues. And what we work towards is try to create policy environments that will enable the extension of the internet to whomever wants to use it, but also the productive, safe, fun ways to use not only the internet but Facebook applications as well. And we pride ourselves on trying to co-create opportunity first and foremost for Africa and Africans, but also for Facebook in the region. And we back that as a company with heavy investments not only in people, but in many of the things that we see as necessary in the region. So I could take lots of time to talk about our infrastructure investments in internet infrastructure, but also the programs that we deliver for training on everything from how to help small to medium businesses grow and work on our platform, to how to tackle digital literacy issues and misinformation issues and disinformation issues. And there is a distinct difference between those two. And that's my work in a nutshell. Answering the question about what we do, there's a myriad of things we do. I think we could speak about the work we've done on COVID, for example, where we have ensured that not only people have access to information that's authoritative and true about the virus, but also remove the disinformation on platform. We do lots of things there. So in Ghana, for example, on the COVID part, we provided ad credits to government so they can get information about COVID and how to stay safe out there. We were instrumental in establishing the WhatsApp chat bot that enables people to ask questions. We've worked with organizations like WHO and Africa CDC to ensure that there's authoritative information at the top of Instagram feeds. And many Ghanaians were amongst the 2 billion people who visited the Facebook COVID information centers that enable people again to gain access. So there's that piece in enabling people to have access to authoritative information, and that can be on COVID, or it might be, as is coming up in Ghana, is extremely important to us, elections. But at the same time, it's working on ensuring that misinformation isn't on our platforms and isn't spread on our platforms. And again, I could wax lyrical about the fact that since 2016, we've more than tripled the size of people who work on our trust and safety issues. These are people who review content and ensure people are safe on the platform. I could speak to you about the changes that I'm sure all of you have seen on your WhatsApp, your inability to forward to 100 people or however many people it might have been before, and only forward highly forwarded messages to one person now. Right. Just the changes that we've made. But I'm sure we'll dig into that as the panel goes on.
Definitely. I'll just quickly go to Juliet now to give us an idea of what she does at Penplusbytes.
Well, thanks, Kokui. So as you say, my name is Juliet Amoah, and I'm Executive Director at Penplusbytes. And we've been working since 2001 to improve the way that policy promises are made, the way that they are received by all stakeholders, and the way that they are interpreted and implemented by the duty bearers. Most people call that improving governance and building active citizens.
Very nice and concise. Thank you. All right, we'll definitely have more questions for you about that. Sule, I'm coming to you now. Media Foundation for West Africa, MFWA, our friends there. Just tell us a bit about what you do.
So maybe to just summarize, I would say I am the Juliet at Media Foundation for West Africa. that would be fine. But I'm the Executive Director at the Media Foundation for West Africa, which is a media development and freedom of expression advocacy organization based here in Ghana, but working across the 16 countries in West Africa. So for every country, we do have a national partner organization, and in some of the countries, we do actually have staff members based there. And our work essentially focuses on ensuring that the environment for freedom of expression, which includes journalistic work, is improved. And over the last 5 years, our work has also been focusing quite hugely on digital rights. So how do we improve the digital ecosystem to enable people to engage on the various platforms that are available for people to fully engage in the democratization of content creation, which is a great opportunity now as a result of the tech platforms, and to engage with stakeholders on all the digital rights policies and legislations that are coming up. And then apart from that, also building the capacity of, our usual friends, that those in the traditional media, and even those who are, getting involved in digital media, how they will be able to do their work and do so professionally.
Thank you, Sule. And last but certainly not least, Palgrave, talk to us about Kandifo Institute.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, Kokui, and a very good afternoon to my colleagues and those that are watching. So basically, Kandifo Institute is a think tank. It's a public policy-oriented think tank, very committed about governance issues and leadership issues and economic issues. Over over the past 1 year, we've been very actively involved in training a number of high school people, senior high school, tertiary, and signed an MOU with the Duke of Edinburgh International Awards Scheme to train 500,000 young people over the next 5 years, which means 100,000 young people every year to go through training to better understand what leadership is, better understand what the economy is. In terms of COVID, we've been actively involved in advocacy and written a number of policy directive papers on how COVID is going to change the narratives of the new decade. And in terms of digitization as well, we've seen that as it relates to tech, electioneering is going to be extremely different this time around. Campaigning is going to be very different. How the various political parties use the various social media platforms that are available is critically going to be important in this year's 2020 general election. And for that reason, we created an online platform called the Ghana Election Watch.com, which is a database that has electioneering results right from 1951 up until 2016, electioneering results that have been analyzed and various developmental stages of the growth of those political parties. So that's what we do at Kandifo Institute.
All right, thank you for that. Coming back to you, Kojo, and our previous question. Now, you gave us a few examples of what Facebook is doing to try to, again, lessen the incidence of fake news being spread. And just give us a bit more information about how the various platforms that Facebook owns is tackling this. And then just a little bit about how you're working with governments as well to try to educate the masses about this problem.
So the various platforms, I mean, we could touch upon lots of stuff is cross-platform. So when I spoke about 35,000, we used to have, I think it was 16,000 or just under 8,000, I think. If we think about that number in 2016 and move towards 35,000 people looking and assessing content for misinformation, but also other breaches of our community standards. I think that's across platforms, that's across Instagram. There'll be people from WhatsApp working on that. There'll be people on Facebook working on that piece. If you look at ads transparency, which is an important piece of what we do for elections, again, that's across platforms. So people who are politicians and want to advertise on our platforms will have to be completely transparent about doing so. In Ghana, they'll have to be in country. They'll have to say who's paying for it. They'll have to register the ad in an ads transparency library, so anybody can access a particular ad and understand possibly the motivations behind it, but certainly who registered it. Again, across platform. If you look at the things we've done with regard to product, as I mentioned, I think I spoke about the changes we've made to WhatsApp. I think people are well versed in how we've tried to cut virality by not enabling people to forward information in the same way they used to. I think also we could talk about the fact checking that's become such an important part of our work. We've invested millions in having independent third-party fact checkers look at posts and information that could misinform or could be completely untrue. And we follow some tenets as we do that, which are remove if there is any risk that content might cause real world harm in situations where the content may not be true, but could be someone's opinion, they may not be accurate. We can reduce particular pieces of content like that and cut engagement with it, as well as inform people that particular content they're engaging with is false, and inform them in many cases that what they're about to share might be false as well. And inform. So if you look at the work of third-party fact checkers like AFP and W and others who are working in the Africa region, much of their work involves highlighting where a particular post may be misinformation or wrong, but also providing people with links to alternative sources and resources that provide access to the truth. And I think those are the things we've done in terms of humans and support from external organizations and a little bit on product. But then when you think about the investments that we've made in digital literacy training programs in order to ensure that people engage with content a little bit differently, should you forward a gory image that you've just received straight away, should you believe everything that your mum, auntie, dad, uncle send you
on WhatsApp? We all have those aunts and moms and parents who like to send us, yeah.
Yeah, we've all been there. My mum is fond of it as well. But should you be doing that? And I think getting people to engage differently with content that they see is something that really is important to us. And across the Africa region, we've been rolling out programs on radio and on platforms. So when you open your Instagram or you open your Facebook, you'll see a program that asks you how you're engaging with a particular piece of content. And I'm pleased to say that I think we're going to be rolling one out in Ghana in very early November as well, that asks people, what are you looking at? Is it true? Should you be forwarding it? How should you be engaging? Those kinds of questions.
We'll come back to you, Kojo, to talk a bit more about how you've specifically been working with the Ghana government. But let's come to you now, Juliet, and Penplusbytes. What are some of the things you have done to try to curb the spread of misinformation in Ghana?
Well, thanks, Kokui. Look, to start off with, I'd like to say that at Penplusbytes, we kind of feel that the definition of misinformation is a little expansive, and that in itself is problematic. Now, the most common definition of fake news that I've heard, certainly, or misinformation, is that it is false or misleading content, which is dressed up to look like news articles, and it's often for the purpose of generating ad revenue or similar gain. Now, if that's the definition for then say to share a home remedy or an alternative medicine, recipe with my family on a closed page such as WhatsApp, would we classify that as fake news? Does it impact the way that news will be received and used? And that's a question that we've been trying to answer with our work here at Penplusbytes, and we've done 3 key interventions that I'd like to share. So the first thing that we've done with our COVID Information for All platform, it's www.covid19infogh.org, and it's probably the asking of our work till date. If we didn't see it before, we quite frankly quickly realized that when the pandemic broke, that information is a form of currency, and that a lot of our most vulnerable groups, people with specific disabilities, people who are off the digital information grid, people who are functionally are not functionally literate, I should be saying. Well, if information is currency, they happen to be very, very poor, and they had limited access. They even had less quality, thanks to all the ways in which information was being churned out, and in what we all agree was and is kind of a fast evolving situation. And so they couldn't kind of life and death decisions that the whole world needed to make, because they just simply didn't have information that made any sense. And so what we did with the COVID period was to build and deploy the COVID-19 InfoGH platform so that we could bridge the info gap a little bit. The site is kind of a mashup of WhatsApp bots, like what Kojo was talking about. It had Twitter feeds in it. We had verified content from fact checkers like the Media Foundation and Dubawa, and it also had a lot of PWD functionalities and widgets like text-to-speech visualizations, magnifiers, etc. Now, that's not anything out of the ordinary if you look at how people are building sites these days. But for us, our key thing at Penplusbytes is using tech that works. Tech that can go from online sources into real life situations. And so here's the thing, Kokui, the groups that we think are these deplorables, they're often not online in the way that we build platforms. So what we do is we supplement this online solution by partnering community radios, and we quickly feed them the lesser told stories, such as how COVID was impacting mental health. We gave tips on how to access government handouts during the period, and all the fact check stories that we could lay our hands on, we gave to these radio stations so that they could translate these into local languages and broadcast these to whole communities in 5 of the most widely spoken languages in Ghana. We had
okay, so you went a step further to not only stop the misinformation, but to also provide additional accurate information to help broaden people's knowledge of the whole situation. I think COVID provided like a right platform for misinformation of, you know, remedies and who it affects, who it doesn't affect, how you can get it, all of that. So it's important for organizations like yours to kind of dispel the myths, I suppose. All right, you mentioned the MFWA. I'm going to go to Sule very quickly, and we'll come back and discuss more. But Sule, let's talk about the British High Commission and how you, MFWA, has worked with them to help the Ghanaian public receive reliable information, particularly around COVID. So tell us more about that partnership.
Thank you very much, Kokui. So our partnership with the British High Commission was through Star Ghana Foundation, through a general support of funding that was provided. And the reality is that even as we do acknowledge that a lot of the misinformation, disinformation, or call it fake news happens through the digital platforms, we are in a country where whatever is shared on the digital platform is transmitted onto our traditional media. And we do have quite a considerable size of our population who depend on local radio for information. So somebody shares something on Facebook or on Twitter or on WhatsApp, and then for my mother, for my grandfather or grandmother, somebody has to repeat that on radio for them to get it. And those are the folks who are much more vulnerable, can be easily deceived into taking all manner of concoctions or adopting different types of practices and so on. So in terms of our work, we're looking at what could we do on the digital side, but at the same time, how can we also partner with local radio stations that are spread across the country to help, you know, mitigate whatever the effects would be. And so what we did was to set up a platform called Fact Check Ghana. I'm sure those of you who are based here in Ghana will be familiar with the work that we do at Fact Check Ghana, and recruited 50 fact checkers, trained them, and subsequently brought on board additional 40 fact checkers. So altogether, we trained 90 fact checkers that we were working with. And then we had to quickly sign up MOU or agreements with 50 radio stations spread across all the country. So we had, you know, including Kokui, your amazing media organization, City FM, Joy FM, you know, Adom FM in Accra, and all the other 16 countries in the region. At least there was 1, 2, or 3 radio stations spread across. So the point was, what we do at Fact Check Ghana, we need to amplify what we do because it's a fairly new platform. So in terms of reach and coverage, it's not as much. So we relied on these radio station partners to be able to, you know, share whatever we were putting out there. Plus, they themselves as media organizations had their own ways of also supporting the public to have fact-based information. But we did also recognize that it was a time when, in terms of the economy of the media, you know, almost every media organization was, you know, struggling. So with that support from Star Ghana, we were able to also make available a total of 565,000 Ghana cedis. That's about a little over $100,000 to these media partners to support the programming that they were doing. And so from Fact Check Ghana, we produced over 100 fact check reports. Together with our media partners, 50 radio stations across the country, we were able to suddenly reach close to 10 million people on a daily basis with fact-based content, dispelling, you know, rumors such as President Akufo-Addo has endorsed this vaccine, which is false. President Akufo-Addo has made this statement, it is false. COVID organics from Madagascar, you know, and it's made of neem and pawpaw trees. So please put together neem and pawpaw trees and take that. We have to quickly dispel that. So essentially, this is the work that we did, from platform to partnership with radio station to training fact checkers and doing daily content production that we share with our folks across the country.
All right. Well, I'll come to Palgrave quickly. about the election season. Obviously, we know what happens during election seasons. There are stories that fly back and forth, some true, some not. But again, the season is ripe for misinformation, for fake news, for opponents wanting to outdo each other. So you're doing something now with regard to the elections, Palgrave. Tell us about what you have established and how you think that's going to help us to kind of curb the incidence of fake news and misinformation during this election season.
Thank you, Kokui. So you know how it works in every electioneering year. You typically will have all the media houses set up election centers, and really just to ensure that they're able to focus on credible electioneering news. And as it is, some media houses would want to have an opportunity to either call off an election to declare who the president is or who the parliamentary candidate is, depending on which constituency has the most interest and eyeballs. So the real goal for the Ghana Election Watch really is to ensure that all the media houses, in addition to all their already existing online platforms that they have for elections, also be able to pick up credible information on the GhanaElectionWatch.com. Now, these are electioneering results that, especially for us and maybe for the focus of this conversation on the Fourth Republic, really election results from 1992, 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, what the dynamics were in constituency A, B, C, and D, what the dynamics are going to be like. I mean, I know that we have additional regions, even though it's not going to change significantly with our election year. We're still going to go by the traditional 10 regions, the polling stations, as 33,000 and so on and so forth. So really it's to ensure that the various manifestos that has come out from the various presidential aspirants and political parties are all on the website. We've analyzed those manifestos and pulled out significant policies, and also seen aligning policies that are either contradicting or in sync with one political party or other, and then seen policies that are already established by either the previous government or either the current government, and bringing in very real topical issues where, as we go into the election, and the various media houses are looking out for credible results and credible information as it relates data that has been adequately researched, data that has been analyzed and researched effectively from 1992 up until date on any constituency and any polling station, on any of the various parliamentary candidates that have either going on their first term, second term, third term, or even new parliamentary candidates that have come into the domain, what their opportunities are, what their strengths are. They will be able to credibly just log on onto the GhanaElectionWatch.com and get these informations readily without needing to be on the field to do research.
All right. Since we're talking elections, here's a question that everyone can take a stab at. As we're going into I should say the last stretch of our election season here in Ghana, what are some of the other things you're doing, Palgrave? So you've got Election Watch. Sulemana and Juliet, you've already talked about things that you're doing with traditional media, specifically to help people who don't have access to social media. And then I'll come to you, Kojo, as well. What are you specifically doing with regard to the Ghanaian elections to help educate people, to help spread credible information, and again, to stop the misinformation that is characteristic of seasons like this? So, Juliet, I'll start with you, then I'll come to Sule and Kojo.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, thanks, Kokui. The first thing that we're doing at Penplusbytes is what we're calling MIL education. Now, we want many people, especially younger people, to get internet media and information literacy. And so we've rolled out a training, a number of training modules, especially around elections, identifying news, looking at who created content, why was that content created, how do they consume it, how do they interact with such content, and so on and so forth. And so we're doing these training modules both in the cities, urban areas, as well as in the rural communities. So far, we've trained over 150 young people, and they are going to be multipliers who will be able to identify fake news within their communities. They can make comparisons between news that is being churned up by chat bots, computer bots, versus things that are being put up by human beings. They know the markers of credible versus dubious sources of information and sites. We're teaching them what kind of that they need to look at in terms of the information that they receive, whether it's about health issues or about politics and political messages, and how they can identify the deepfakes that are flying around. Now, the second intervention that we are doing around the elections is what we call the Social Media Tracking Center, and the SMTC is what we call it, and it's like an aggregator. And what it does is that we first deployed it in 2012. We improved upon it in 2016, and we're hoping to make it even better this year. What AGI does is an early warning system, and what it does is that we feed it with issues, sentences, words that our researchers have told us appear each time that there is trouble brewing any community. Some there are glitches in voting equipment. It will show up in arguments or polling station unrest, and even gun violence and the threat of it. So AGI goes around the internet, except for closed groups, but this year we will be building in the closed groups as well. And she kind of takes all those keywords and draws line graphs to show the relationships, to show where the emerging issues are. And she tells us when a flashpoint they erupt, and we're able to feed that to the police and the electoral management bodies so that they can take action, and hopefully we can contribute to a peaceful election.
Let me come to Kojo very quickly. Kojo, you've got Facebook, you've got WhatsApp, you've got Instagram. I remember, I think it was 2016, there was a story that the IGP at the time was actually considering shutting off social media completely so that people wouldn't spread fake news, because you've got people who say, oh, a ballot box has been stolen in this constituency, or, there's trouble fomenting in such and such constituency. All of these things spread so quickly on social media. We know that WhatsApp, we've spoken about it. How are you targeting that specifically with regard to Ghanaian elections, this year's election?
So super quick, because I know time's tight. I think what you outlined is a double-edged sword. There's this piece in 2016 where people suggest let's turn the internet off. At the same time, people were saying social media for the first time provided more transparency than ever before into this election. So I do think we need to recognize that piece. I think building up to I think building up to the next election, we'll continue doing what we've done. We don't just start now. Our work on elections starts months before, and we've placed a lot of importance, as we do all elections, on the Ghanaian election. So we continue to work with all the parties. You asked what we're doing with the Ghanaian government. It's exactly what we're doing with the CPP, NDC, GUM, which is to ensure and enable better civic engagement and an understanding of their policies, just as Palgrave is doing, but also the work that we do with the Electoral Commission as well, to ensure that social media doesn't get in the way of a free and fair election and doesn't get into things like voter suppression or whatever else. So we'll continue doing that. I mentioned earlier on as well that we will be running a program on how people can spot fake news, which will be launched. It's launched in a number of African countries, but will be launched in Ghana. I think it's the 16th of November. Will run up until the election, helping Ghanaians, many of whom are savvy already, but helping Ghanaians, many of whom may be new to the internet, to understand how to spot fake news. And I loved what Sulemana said. We're talking about the misinformation on social media. We forget how important traditional media forms like the radio is. And that's why Facebook will be running this program, not only on all our platforms, but also on local radio as well, in Tree, in Ewe, in all the languages, Hausa, that's so important to Ghanaians. So we'll be doing that piece. And then you mentioned since 2016, what we know is that since then, we've had 200 elections globally. And the same elections team that works on these global elections, whether it be in the US or in recently had one, we will run out the same measures, products that we do elsewhere here for the Ghana election as well, to make sure that our platforms at least, and we know the election is much wider, than just Facebook's, please. Our platforms at least help to ensure the integrity and the smooth running of what is a really, really important election.
All right, Sule, I'll come back to you. You can also make your comments on what we're discussing already, but could you also just comment a bit about retractions, which never seem to get the same traction as misinformation? So somebody puts out a fake story or a story that could be damaging to someone else or to an entity. Perhaps at some point they're asked or forced to retract it, to withdraw the comment or statement, but does it usually get the same attention as the fake news, the misinformation? So how do we also deal with that? How do we also deal with correcting the mistake after it's already gone out there?
Well, I think we are at a time when, particularly because of elections, in fact, we've had occasions where politicians would admit to us that, yes, they got it wrong, but they will try to justify why it must stay. You know, so yes, from the analysis, we admit that we got it wrong or we got the figures wrong, but the NDC is doing the same. Why are you not guys talking about them? Or if it is from the NDC, they will tell you the NDC is doing the same, and you're allowing the things to go. So there's no way we're going to pull this thing down. I think the way to go is to continue to mount pressure, educate the citizenry to know what is true from what is false. And that's exactly what we are trying to do with our Fact Check Ghana project. If you go on the platform now, you would see one of our stories now is how citizens, you know, what they should know about fake news going into the elections. And at the end of that, you would see a link to how to spot fake news. And I'm happy that Kojo has mentioned that there is something like that coming up, which would provide an opportunity for us to either learn more or to engage more and all of that. Look, at this stage, talking about misinformation or disinformation, it's quite often deliberate. 20%, and they would say it's 40%. And if you know, I mean, if you have you on radio have been part of the political conversations and the debates over the period, one of the critical things has been who has grown the economy better? Is it Mahama or Akufo-Addo? And so we've had to put out an analysis of that, you know, indicating what each government has done and so on. So at this stage, you really would not have any politician agreeing to say, yes, I got it wrong and I'm pulling it down, because that would be something that would allow opponents to come at them. So those of us who are working independently are supposed to at least continue to hype those things that are put out there to let the public know it's not the right thing.
Agreed. All right. If you're on the platform with us, please feel free to send the questions to our panelists. Again, we're discussing the dissemination of misinformation, and specifically with regard to our election season that's coming up. COVID-19 brought a lot of misinformation in the system, and we're talking to our panelists about the efforts that they are making to help ensure that we get the correct information about whatever we see in the media on all of these platforms that are available to us. And we've been getting some great insight from them as to the projects they've been working on. Kojo, did you want to add something else to what we said before, or was it Palgrave? I wanted to just give them a quick chance before we move on. Palgrave, can you hear me?
It wasn't me. I can talk for Ghana, so I'm happy to step aside. It wasn't me.
Okay, all right. Palgrave, go ahead.
Well, so basically, I mean, I just to add up to some of the things that we're saying in relation to the elections, we're also raising up electioneering observers. So on the day of the elections, we're going to have close to about 22,000 young people that are deployed, scattered across to about maybe 30,000 polling stations, just to have an opportunity and have a feel of the electioneering process and be able to also feedback onto the online platform, because we created a mobile app, which we're going to launch maybe 20 days to the election, and then people can start using it. So whatever information or whatever details that are happening at the various polling stations, you can immediately reference the Ghana Election Watch website and see the figures and see the feeds and things that are happening. So some of the things that we're also doing towards the general election. And then in terms of messaging as well, we do a number of advocacy, media advocacy, both traditional and online, writing papers, and making sure that in terms of messaging, people are discreet and quite honoring with their messaging. That it's not healthy to use some words that may not necessarily represent your political ideology and not even got to the conversations that comes from the various people that would want to entice euphoria as it relates to the electioneering fanfare.
All right. Sule, you mentioned the funding that you used to help some of us media houses with or partnering with us to help share some of this good information and to help train us on what to do, what not to do. Is funding an issue for the work that you do? Juliet, I'll come to you on this one as well, Penplusbytes. And do you find that it's difficult to get support for some of the initiatives that you want to roll out to help in the fight against misinformation?
Yeah, of course, funding would always be an issue, and particularly in the NGO sector. We were all hit by this pandemic. You already have funding for specific projects, so you are committed to using the funding in a particular way. And right. So even if you have the funds, what you can use it for sometimes would restrict you. And that's why I think increasingly it's great to hear that a lot of funders are beginning to consider offering general support to organizations so that we can always at any point in time focus on what is of priority, what is important for the people, and invest it in ways that can help, sort of mitigate whatever challenges that our target groups are going through. So yes, it's always a problem, but problems must exist to be solved.
We like that, Juliet.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't say it better than Sule, but yes, we do have the same sort of funding issues. We think that definitely media information literacy campaigns to educate people, to get them to understand how content is created is really, really important. But funding for that sector of work is very limited. At the moment, we only have the German government through the DW Academy that are supporting that sort of work. And so it's really, as Sule was saying, the funding that you receive is ring-fenced. You do realize that there are emerging issues. You do know that if you were able to tackle that issue, it would be sort of the silver bullet, so to speak, to curb some of the things that we're finding in the space. But yeah, as Sule says, it's one of those things that we're working around. We're trying to look at different sources of funding. With the COVID, I think a lot of the governments and a lot of our partners have started to think more about how we can make sure that our communities are empowered to access information and make the right sorts of decisions. So hopefully we will start to get a bit of funding in that area.
All right, so again, this is our discussion on the dissemination of misinformation. It's Tech in Ghana 2020, the first virtual edition of the conference, but the 7th overall. I'm talking to our guest, Kojo Boakye, who is Director of Public Policy at Facebook. Juliet Amoah is Executive Director at Penplusbytes. Sulemana Braimah is Media Foundation for West Africa Executive Director. And Boakye-Danquah is Executive Director of Kandifo Institute. They've been giving us some insight into the projects that they've been working on to help curb misinformation and dissemination of it, especially in these times and seasons of COVID-19, elections, etc., where a lot of false information can spread like wildfire. And I don't know about you, but I've been quite educated about some of the things they've been putting in place and the work that they've been doing that we don't always see. And I know a lot of your platforms sometimes come under criticism for maybe not doing enough or for being biased, particularly, Kojo, I know you've probably faced a lot of that on your platforms about questions of bias or questions of not doing enough to stop the proliferation of some of these things. But looks as though you're responding very well to such criticism from what you've told us today. Are you still, yeah? Are you still facing that kind of backlash?
I think when you have a platform that's used, or platforms that are used by more than 3 billion people around the world, there will always be.
Right.
And I'm also struck whenever I have these conversations that actually what we're not talking about are new issues. So there has always been misinformation of some form, it may not have been played out on social media, and I understand the risks of virality with social media, but there's always been misinformation. Even before print, there was misinformation. The challenge that Sulemana talked about, or you mentioned, with regard to retractions,
Yes.
Many of us will recall, even when a politician or whomever else is willing to retract, or a newspaper retracts, many of us will recall reading a huge headline somewhere else about how bad something or somebody was, and then weeks later seeing a retraction on page 16, probably in the lower right-hand corner, that says we're sorry for this. We're sorry for this story that was untrue. So we're talking about traditional issues being played out on social media. So I think the criticism will come, and to be frank, Kokui, the criticism sometimes is valid. I think what I pride myself on, and I think many of us in the company pride ourselves on, is when we hear that criticism, it doesn't go in one ear and out of the other. It's acted upon. So many of the things, and I don't want to make this into a Facebook advertisement of what it's done for misinformation, but many of the things I've spoken about stem, and I'm sure Sulemana, Palgrave, Juliet have been looking at these issues for a long time, and we welcome their feedback. But even they can admit, as experts, that many of the things I've spoken about have stemmed from things we may have got wrong and been criticized for, or feedback we received from the many NGOs, activists, and members of the public who tell us we could do better in a particular area. So where we've increased the number of people working on trust and safety to now 35,000, that stems from the fact that people want to do more. Where we've extended the fact checker program to more languages and more countries than ever before. I think we have more than 16 countries now, however many languages. That stems from people telling us, hey, we need you to do some fact checking, like the brilliant work Sulemana's doing. When we run programs like when we run programs like the one we're going to run on platforms, and you'll see that on your Instagram and Facebook feeds, but also on local radio, that stems from, yes, experts that we have internally that recognize this is a need, but it also stems from us being told, hey, run a program for people on your platform and on local radio, and we act on it. So criticism is welcome and necessary as long as you act on it, and we do.
There you go. Okay, we've got a couple of questions from some of our participants. So what are your thoughts? This is for all of you who would like to answer. What are your thoughts on influencers? Influencers collaborating to share news or information. You've got some pretty influential people out there who have become social media stars, who have big following, who, when they talk, people listen, people take what they say as being credible, sometimes without fact checking. What are your thoughts on that, on the role of influencers now in the social media space? Okay, who would like to take this one first?
Right, I'll go. We use a lot of those influencers in the work that we do, specifically because they've got the following, because they've got access to people. But it's one of those dicey things that you've got to walk a middle ground on, because there's the point that some of them haven't been trained. They don't know manipulated media. If they see it, they don't know deepfakes. Responsible for perpetuating what we've all been discussing this morning. And so what we've done is that we've taken some of those ones, we've brought them into the fold and actually trained them, all those media influencers. We've actually trained more than 50 of them, where we're showing them what they can do to be able to be more responsible in the work that they've set themselves to do. And we call them social media animators, and so it is what they can do, but in a guided space, and I think that that's what's important in this.
All right.
Can't stress that more than enough. I'm excited about the work Juliet is doing to train them. I think for those people who Spider-Man movie fans, this will sound familiar. With great power comes great responsibility.
Responsibility, yeah.
And many of these many of these influencers, for whatever reason, have great power. I think we know how they encourage engagement and how they can, in many instances, shine light on things that needs light shone upon them. But also, we would encourage all those influencers to use our platforms as we would anyone else, to use our platforms in a really, really responsible way, and thinking about what you share, how it might be received, and whether it sits and adheres to our community standards, which are global standards that most of our users adhere to. But we hope that influencers and everyone else do as well. So yeah, I mean, great power, great responsibility is what I would stress.
Just to follow up on that, especially in this day and age where many of these influencers are monetized now on social media. So the more views, the more follows, the more likes they get, the more money they get for that social media presence, which, since money is a motivator now, which also kind of muddies the game. You know, when it comes to, you talked to Kojo about responsibility. So you've got the dichotomy of putting out something that's going to be sensational, or that, you know, that's going to get me a lot of following, a lot of feedback, a lot of subscribers, as opposed to possibly doing the noble thing, which may not be as popular, but is the right thing to do, you know? So do you think monetization possibly could also be a factor in here, about the way some of the influencers behave on our platforms?
Is that to me?
Sorry, Kojo. Yes, you can, unless someone else.
I mean, look, money motivates people to do all sorts of things, and if we had time afterwards to look at specific examples, I can tell you privately, okay, Kojo Boakye's own opinion that this guy might be using, this girl or guy might be posting for clickbait. That would be possibly. But I'm also mindful that actually use of FB platforms to engage and to make money, whether it be as an SMB or an influencer, small to medium business or an influencer, is something that lots of people have done. And actually, when people start using it productively, and I'm not quite sure, Kokui, of the example that you have, but when people start using it productively to create careers, whether it be in social influencing or outside, actually that productive use and the reason to generate money often, not always, but often generates a more responsible use of it. You've seen influencers who have posted things that were untrue, sensationalist, divisive, who have then lost their access because they've broken things like our community standards, or whatever Twitter has or whatever Google has, have then lost their access to gaining revenue. And there's some well-publicized examples. But actually, what you're finding in the more sophisticated, responsible influencer is actually, you know, what I post, actually I have to be careful about, because not only for the community to watch, but also this is my career, my income, and whatever else. So two-sided.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. Sorry, Palgrave, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yes, I've always been thinking around this question, and I'm glad Kojo is here. But you know, really, the question around influencers is critical. But it's also it's very individualistic on the individual, because sometimes the persons feel that they have been on a path towards their own influencing journey, and then there's the policy aspect of all social media that comes along. But I also want to look at it from a value system base. So really, there are persons that really on a very good path of being an influencer, were very credible with some of the things that they did. Then the moment they realized they became influencers, they changed. You know, so really, I mean, what do you do at that stage? You know, for Kojo, who is, I mean, looking at policy on FB and all the other platforms that FBOs, yeah, you know, really, what do you do? Do you discredit the person? Do you delete the person's accounts? Do you protect some of the misinformation that is being disseminated for the integrity of the platform that is being used? Because that's really the question. And then also, there are some times that, and I like to ask this question as well, that really, what makes one an influencer? Because sometimes you may not have the large following, but you may be influencing a smaller part of your own community. And once Facebook has not given you that
credibility tick. You know, like when you're on Facebook, there's a
verified,
there's a
I hope it's not deemed the credibility
verified.
It would be verified or not.
Palgrave, just as
Once Facebook has not verified.
But
just as I was talking, Palgrave, I was thinking maybe Kojo just needs to do a simple thing. Pull all the influencers and tell them to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. I think that's what they really into themselves.
Or maybe Kojo should just tell them, yeah, and then also maybe if you are verified, it means that you are notified by Facebook for your contribution. But then if you go off tangent, you will be unverified or de-verified. And then maybe Facebook should also look at other persons that are of a minor influencing, and then also verify those people. Because I mean, if I've been on Facebook since I've been on Facebook for the past 10 years.
Are you lobbying for that? Are you lobbying for that?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not being verified.
I should stress that the blue tick isn't Facebook signing off on the post or content of influencers. So I do want to stress that's important. What the blue tick does tell you though is that, and I don't have a blue tick, and I'm sure Kokui, I'm sure you have one. Kokui is.
I don't have one. I don't have one, but I'll take one, Kojo. I'll take one if you want to give me one.
We'll take one. We'll definitely take one.
If it was me deciding on handing them out, I would gladly give you all the blue tick. But the blue tick tells people that Kokui or Kojo or Sulemana or Juliet or Palgrave is who they say they are. Go to this first. You want to hear from those people. That's the overarching goal of the blue tick. But when it comes to influencers who post divisive content that may cause what we term real world harm, division or a fight between NDC and NPP supporters, or NDC and NPP, or NDC and CPP, or whichever party. Those are the kind of influencers where actually that content will have to follow the same rules as it does if anyone posts. Does it breach our community standards? Is there a risk of real world harm? Pull it down if there is. Is it false but something we leave up but we mark with the help of fact checkers? Mark it if it is. Is it something where we just inform people that there are other authoritative sources of news? We'll do that also. So influencers, whether they're influencers like Cristiano Ronaldo, 78 million Instagram followers, he's subject to the same rules. I think it's 78, last count. is subject to the same rules and subject to maintaining our community standards, adhering to those community standards as Kojo Boakye is or anybody else is. So I do want to stress that. And also, if those influencers are posting stuff that is sensationalist, untrue, creates a possibility of real world harm, I encourage the community to report that to us so we can act on it. That's key.
All right. We've got another question from a participant who wants to know whether or not, and specifically to Kojo, they want your opinion on this, whether or not Ghana should consider the path of having policies in place to check fake news, as some other countries might have, and to sanitize the media space this way. What do you think about that?
I think it depends on what country. I think there are countries that do have policies towards the media that encourage both free and open media, which is key to any country. And actually, we hold Ghana up, personally, I do, within the company and outside, as a place where the media for a long time, and there have been parts of our history where it hasn't been as free and open as we would like it to be, but the media for a long time, relative to other countries, has been free and open. And I would encourage any policy or regulation that looks at that to have that as its North Star, that any discussion between the media or between the public should be built upon what is a human right, which is right of freedom of expression, and that's key. I would say as well that in whatever area, whether it be privacy, connectivity, content regulation, whatever, just as we are across this continent, Facebook's public policy team is ready, willing, and able to work with government, but also CSOs and other observers on creating, as I started this panel telling you, with creating jointly through a multi-stakeholder process, policy environments that work for all and tackle some of our biggest challenges.
Okay, and we're almost out of time. 10 seconds. What are your thoughts on presidents tweeting for propaganda purposes, like the way Donald Trump does? But no, what are your thoughts on leaders of countries using social media to push their ideology and to stir up trouble, so to speak? Okay, Sulemana, I'll give this one to you before we wrap up. Very quickly, what are your thoughts on this? I'm sure Kojo has thoughts, Palgrave has thoughts.
I'm happy. I'm focused on the question. I'm happy to tell you my thoughts.
Well, I think my pattern thoughts would be that, look, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp, these platforms don't create content by themselves. It is we, the users, who create the content. And therefore, it is important that as we talk to the content, the platforms to implement measures that will help curtail these activities, it is also on the other side important to engage the users on, of course, there would always be bad people who would want to do the bad things, but there are, I believe, at all times, good people more than bad people, and those good people need to know that there are folks who may be trying to influence them negatively, and they themselves have also a responsibility to ensure that they behave in ways that advances the cause of everyone in a positive way rather than in a negative way. So the media and information literacy work that Juliet and co are doing is great. The fact-checking work is great. And I believe that collaboratively, we would be able to use the democratization of content creation for better purposes rather than for worse.
Thank you, Sule. Can't believe we're out of time, but this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much to all of you, Kojo, Juliet, Sule, Palgrave. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking part in this discussion for Tech in Ghana 2020, the dissemination of misinformation and matters arising. All right, we'll be looking out for all of the things that you've spoken about, the various projects that you're putting in place, particularly leading up to election 2020. And again, thank you so much for spending time with us for Tech in Ghana 2020. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who joined the session as well. Don't forget, if you're continuing with the sessions this afternoon from 2 p.m., we'll have more sessions on FinTech and Agri-Tech. So you can sign up for those. If you haven't already, go to techinghanaconference.com, and you can also sign up for sessions tomorrow as well. So this brings me to the end of my time with you. My name is Kokui Selormey Hansen. It's been a pleasure spending my morning and a little bit of my afternoon with you for Tech in Ghana 2020. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye.